Don't rebuild their burned bridge. I'm Ann Margaret with this week's Sacred Sunday message to raise the vibration of your body, mind, and spirit. So, in any worthwhile relationship, you're going to hit bumps in the road. Something's going to happen where there's an upset, things don't happen exactly the way that you want them to. Somebody gets upset, there's an emotional reaction, perhaps there's a trigger. And something there's a crack in the foundation of the relationship. Okay, welcome to intimacy. This is guaranteed in any worthwhile relationship. No one's perfect, right? Not one of us is perfect. Little breaking news today, right? Yet too many of us lack the ability to have the difficult conversations that lead to more profound intimacy in our lives. And we just sacrifice relationships. We cut people out, we block them. We feel too confronted by a conversation, so we just don't have it. And what's unfortunate is that relationships are precious, and if we're not learning how to have these difficult conversations in these challenging times in relationships, then we're going to find ourselves very alone and miserable and lacking any sort of depth in our relationships, all right, our relatedness with one another. So whether someone's done this to you, they've burnt a bridge, or whether you've done this to someone else, I'm so glad you're joining me, because both of these scenarios have opportunities, and for our growth, of course. And then also, it might not be a burnt bridge. Don't we have the unfortunate tendency to see things as black or white? And we will be like, ah, oh, it's done. Or, oh, there's so much promise, and we don't recognize when it is done. These two extremes, they have a middle as well. So your bridge might not be burnt, it just might be wobbly. So, too many of our relationships are sacrificed due to this spiritual ignorance, due to this inability to communicate effectively or to face things that are unpleasant. Okay, so let's figure out, is it a burnt bridge or a wobbly bridge? So if you are somebody, I want you to personalize this, because it's stupid if you're just watching this to be entertained by me this morning and not making it personal, right? So if you're avoiding conflict by blaming the other person, that's one scenario, okay? If you're avoiding conflict by trying to rebuild a bridge somebody else has either broken or burnt completely, that's also an issue, okay? And our egos can be very tricky in trying to entangle us in this egoic trip of, oh, well, I'm doing everything I can. Okay, but maybe you're avoiding the conflict that needs to be discussed. That is a really difficult place to be, being uncomfortable, but that's the only place we grow, right? So if you're avoiding conflict, period, that's a trap. All right. So let's look here. Where do you fall in this pattern? Where's your personal relationship to this? So when conflict arises with somebody, are you somebody who immediately takes it in and assumes that you're at fault? Are you somebody who immediately takes out your finger and points at somebody else and says, no, they're at fault? Sometimes we do both, right? We do different ones with different relationships. Sometimes there's that one relationship in our lives, and you know what that is for you, right? You know which one that is for you, where it's like you fall into that same pattern over and over again. Maybe it's finger pointing, or maybe it's taking it all in and assuming 100% of the blame, or thinking that you have control over something that you don't have control over. So let's look at three different things. This is a root in the third chakra, and I wear my fiery dress today because fire is of the third chakra. Fire is transformational, this energy of fire and of burning things. It can be a transformation towards something that is more empowering for you, or it can completely devastate your relationship. So it's how you use the fire that's important. And in this third chakra, this is the relationship to our ego, what we can and cannot control. And it's also where we fall into, if we're just relying on this third chakra and we forget about the seventh, we forget about the co-creative aspect of our lives, that we're not just the dictators in our lives, we're collaborating with other people. And when we forget, we're not only collaborating with other people, but we're collaborating with the universe, with God. We cannot control everything. And also, we can control a lot. So it's that balance of what we can and can't control, our relationship to that God archetype, Are we empowering ourselves to be creators in our lives, or are we just kind of pointing the finger saying, fix this? That's where we're going to go to town today. So find out where, think about one relationship with this talk today. Where are you in relationship to that pattern? Are you somebody who just points the finger, or are you taking ownership of something because you're trying to avoid this conflict? You know, maybe the other person did something pretty nasty, you know? So we're gonna look at that trap. All right, so diving in, what's the purpose of bridges? Every relationship we have, from me to you, it's entangled in that third chakra, and we talk about relationship cords being entangled, if you know that verbiage. If not, it's a bridge. Every relationship is a bridge, from me to this and from you to this. And we have an intimacy of a co-created relationship where I take care of everything over here and you take care of everything over here. Now, is it perfectly clean like that all the time? Of course not, okay? Of course not. But if we don't acknowledge the purpose of the bridge is to get from this side to you, or to get from you to me, then we're going to not realize what we're cutting ourselves off from when the bridge is burnt. Okay, so it bridges a gap between one place and another, and underneath is like this. I mean, maybe it's a swamp, maybe it's a lake that's hard to cross, right? So it's important to recognize the bridge. All right, you build your half, they build theirs. Now, they cannot burn your bridge, your side of the bridge, only theirs, okay? And if you ignore this, you'll end up in the water, right? You just walk across your bridge like everything's fine, everything's great, and then what happens? Boop, and you dive, you fall right into the swamp or the water or whatever, because you don't realize that they've completely burnt their bridge. All right, so let's ask a very critical question now. Is the relationship, or is their side of their bridge burnt? Or is it wobbly? This is really important to get. Is it burnt or is it wobbly? Let's look at a burnt bridge. All right, this means that somebody has done something to you that allows no path, zero path back to them. They've cut you off, they've blocked you. A lot of you guys are experiencing that. I know I have. All right, they've ostracized you from their family. That can be very, very, very painful. They've completely cut you off like you're some sort of disease and you're unworthy of relatedness with them. That's a burnt bridge, okay? So if somebody has given you no paths back to them, they're not responding to you. You've reached out. They're not getting back to you. They're burning their bridge, or maybe they're not ready yet, okay? So we're going to get into that too. Wobbly bridges. What are wobbly bridges? We see them all the time, right? We have infrastructure in this country where we have a certain amount of money devoted to reinforcing the bridges, all right? My dad used to build bridges. He's an engineer. So I love bridges. I love talking about bridges. So wobbly bridges always need reinforcement from wear and tear, all right? What does this look like? Okay, maybe in your relationship, somebody took the emotional axe and just started hitting the bridge. Okay, maybe it's a wooden bridge. We'll pretend it's a wooden bridge, right? They just took the emotional axe and started hitting everywhere because they're so upset about something. They're not taking the accountability of communicating with a spiritual intelligence. They're just trying to come at you from a reactionary place. It comes from being disappointed, having an expectation of one another, or a desire that's unfulfilled, right? These expectations might be they did something that hurt your feelings, and you didn't say anything about it. Maybe you didn't speak up with what you did need. They changed. Maybe they changed and they're no longer what you want them to be. Well, welcome to life, guys. You can't control their life. They're going to live their life the way that they are going to live their life, and you should too, right? You need to go and live your life and make your changes. So, is it a burnt bridge? Is it a wobbly bridge? That's a good question to ask, all right? And sometimes we don't know. We feel like it's burnt, and then we're like, oh, wow, no, they didn't burn it. It's just wobbly, and they come back, you know? Or maybe it's burnt and they need to completely rebuild it. Let's look at scenario number one. So somebody's done the burning. Somebody else has done the burning, okay? How do you know if they have burnt their bridge with you? Like I said, you're not allowed into their lives. They're like a toddler with crossed arms. They're having a fit. They don't want to repair it. They're not willing to have a difficult conversation with you. That's not going to be great. You're not going to be all smiles. There's going to be some heated emotional tension probably that needs to be worked through. Welcome to intimacy. It's holding each other's hands. It's having the difficult conversations when you want to run the other way. But every single time that you have those conversations, you deepen your intimacy. It's amazing how that works. Every single time you both come to the table and you're committed to not your ego or being right or making the other person bad or wrong or look bad, whatever. If you're both committed to the relationship and resolution rather than your egos, a deepening of intimacy occurs. Okay? So, what's the consequence of rebuilding their bridge? How many people are in this department? I know I have been in this trap so many times. Man, 10, 20 years ago, for sure 20 years ago, but even 10 years ago, it's like I would be walking along my bridge, like nothing that they could do would have me question, right? And it would bring on dysfunctional relationships, disharmonious exchanges where you're ignoring their inability or their flat out refusal to take responsibility for themselves, but they're just blaming you. Anybody who's an authoritative figure in this world, you're a teacher, you have some position as a leader, you are almost always going to experience this from somebody who is working for you. Maybe you're a boss and you have employees. We've all been in that position too with authority. What is this about? They're projecting their childhood issues, their mom, their dad issues onto you as an authority. So this can happen quite often, right? And you can ignore it, or you can recognize, you know what, they are not fulfilling their end of the bargain. They're acting like children. They're just pointing their finger at me. I know I'm not 100% to blame. Let me look at what I can clean up. But then holding that space, holding the line where they also need to take a step forward. What happens when we go and we try and rebuild their bridge? It's like giving a screaming toddler a toy. What does that teach? It just enables the dysfunctional behavior at your expense, right? So moms, dads know this. Like when you give a toddler a screaming toy, what's the short-term benefit? Oh, it's great. They're quiet. They're not yelling anymore. They don't hate you. All right. What's the long-term benefit? You've got a brat on your hands who's going to always expect to get their way rather than nurturing a mature child to be able to grow into an adult and understand cause and effect. Ooh, that's a big one. All right. So what's scenario two? Scenario two is maybe the bridge is wobbly. Oh, this is a tough one. Welcome to intimacy again, right? So every intimate relationship must be reinforced. When something comes up, it's an opportunity for reinforcement. And that's like, you do a survey of a bridge. You say, oh, here's some weak points from this wear and tear, or maybe the axe, the emotional axe, right? And you understand how to reinforce it. Because a well-worn bridge is crossed many times, me to you to me, etc. And this wear and tear requires reinforcement. But what happens if you ignore the wobbliness? The bridge surveyor comes and they're like, yeah, here's a little crack and here's a weak point and whatever, but we're just going to ignore this. What happens? Ooh, don't ignore them. Don't ignore the wobbliness. You'll feel it. Your body will feel constricted. You'll feel like you're trying to avoid that relationship, right? But this is a superficial head under the covers approach that will only fester superficiality and a lack of trust. A lack of trust. Think about it. Your wobbly bridge, you're not going to cross that with any sort of confidence. You're going to stop. You're going to withhold more personal things with that person because you just don't trust them anymore because you didn't address the wobbliness of the bridge. Now, if you're going, well, they didn't address the wobbliness of the bridge, then you're probably pointing your finger, right, and saying, you know what? I never said I wasn't happy about this exchange. Like, let's talk about this. This didn't sit right with me. Not you're a jerk and label them with some name calling and assertions of their behavior, but just saying, this didn't feel right. This felt off. We need to talk about this. That's addressing the wobbliness with a responsible, integral way, okay, approach. So when someone damages a bridge with you and you act like nothing happened, you're so afraid of conflict that you're trying to ignore it and you're like trying to rebuild their part of their bridge. All right? And they're having a fit on their bridge, on their end of the bridge, right? But you're acting like nothing happened. Both are delusional behaviors, right? Both are very destructive delusional behaviors. All right? And then you wake up the next day and you're like, or maybe you're the one who has the emotional acts and you're like, chop it, chop it, chop it. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, Why is the bridge damaged? You're not looking at what you've done, okay? So there's a lot of traps here, but let's look at the consequence of repairing your bridge. So when you have the courage to repair your part of the bridge, and you're going a lot of different places in life, right? These bridges are intimate relationships, friends, business acquaintances, business partnerships, friends, having children or family, right? All of these bridges, it's not like that's the only way you can go, right? We know it when we're driving from here to there, we see a bridge and it's broken down. What do? Our little GPS usually figures it out for us. But in the old days, we used to look at a map and say, okay, what's the other routes that can get me there? Okay, so we're going to talk about that in just 1 second, but what's the consequence of repairing your bridge? You come back to wholeness with one another. You have a stronger connection with your partner, or with that friend, all right, or with that business colleague, and you establish a deeper trust. In order to preserve and deepen the quality of that ease and that intimacy with one another, both parties must be willing, invested to resolve that discordance. So, but if they're not, it doesn't mean the bridge is burnt. I've had relationships that I had that first burnt bridge element, right? Where it felt like, wow, they burnt their side of the bridge. It doesn't mean they're never going to rebuild it, you guys. It doesn't mean they're never going to rebuild it. So you don't have to throw in the towel with those, but you don't want to keep standing there trying to cross it when they haven't done it yet. So one of the biggest mistakes is just focusing on that one bridge and ignoring the rest. Some people just need time. Some people just need space or something to happen to them. Maybe they have somebody die in their lives and they're like, you know what? That wakes them up and they go, I don't want to stay angry with this person. I want to figure out how to forgive them or to figure out what I did to cause this. So you never know. I don't believe it's ever about giving up hope or that desire to connect with them, but it's adjusting your expectations. That's a very big difference there. So what do? Patience. You have patience and you have detachment. Maybe that person will never rebuild that bridge for you, back to you. Maybe they'll never do it. But it doesn't mean you need to burn your bridge in relationship to them. That you don't need to. It takes more energy to do that, right? Just continue to cross the bridges that are symbiotic with you, that do come together. All right. Also, have a relentless commitment with these other relationships that are broken or burnt in some way. Clean up, rebuild your part, forgive them, do whatever you need to do to make sure your half of the bridge is stable and you're at the other end if they ever choose to rebuild that again. All right, so that relentless commitment. And until they rebuild it, let it be. Just let it be. Have patience. Go invest in other relationships. All right, you guys. So thanks so much for joining me for today's talk. If you know somebody who needs this, or you want this to be the icebreaker to that relationship that you've kind of ignored, that's wobbly, that bridge that needs to be reinforced, share this with them. Be like, let's talk. Let's talk. I want to rebuild this with you. All right, whatever you need to do, use this video however you choose. And until next time, remember, keep raising the vibration. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.